Now let's bring in our regular Tuesday panel, former Liberal Senator Holly Hughes and Daily Telegraph journalist James Willis. So welcome to you both. And let's get back to today's top story on Iran. Now, Holly, you just heard the criticisms from Michaelia Cash that the government should have acted on this 2.5 years ago. February 2023 was when the first recommendation came from that Senate committee. Do you think they need to front up tomorrow and explain why they were so slow?
Well, I think absolutely they need to front up and explain why they've refused to take any action. But we've seen them refuse time and again to take any action when it's come to anti-Semitism in this country. And they've consistently not put the national security and the Australian community at the front and centre when they've made these decisions around bringing in Gazan refugees without appropriate checks and the right sorts of visas, and the denial that some of these attacks were actually terrorist attacks, when now we clearly know that they were. So this government has a lot of explaining to do, not only to the Australian Jewish community, but to the whole of Australia, because at the end of the day, thankfully no one was killed, no one was injured during these attacks. But can you imagine if a foreign country had killed Australians on Australian soil, what the impact would that be going forward? Yet this government has sat on its hands until it was finally forced to do something today. And this is the problem with this government. They're too busy playing domestic politics and to a small, quite petty audience rather than taking the actions that they should as the national government to keep all Australians safe. Yeah, exactly. James, we have to also acknowledge the extraordinary work that ASIO has done and just the forensic work in putting together the details. I mean, the cryptocurrency, the encrypted apps, so difficult to unpick all of that to work out this web of connections that Mike Burgess spoke about.
Yeah, and you have to understand, Sherry, our police and our intelligence agencies do a remarkable job, often with not the resources that a lot of other countries do have. This is incredible work, but I agree with Holly, and I think that there was enough concern about Iran and what Iran was threatening and doing in the Middle East that action should have been taken far earlier. And as we know, it doesn't take much. Australia has had a precedent in regards to removing ambassadors from Canberra, so certainly this action should have taken much sooner than the horrors we heard today and the potential loss of Australian life on Australian soil.
I want to turn to this net zero debate. Now, during the Coalition Party Room meeting, the MPs that you're about to see here on screen demanded that the party finally adopt a position. Now, Susan Lee has said that she's not going to make a decision on this for about a year. Now, Holly, I know you support Susan Lee, and I've been extremely critical of her, but the truth is the party can't wait a year to have a position on net zero or an energy policy. They can't hold the government to account unless they know what they stand for.
Look, and I understand what you're saying on this issue, and I actually saw Susan. I was in Canberra on Sunday night for my last ever Senate event, which was great. Got a lovely pewter mug or goblet.
Well, congratulations.
But, there is this sort of overarching issue there. Look, I don't think we're going to get to net zero by 2050, and I don't think anyone with half a brain in this country thinks it's actually going to happen. Now, to me, it would seem that there's a couple of debates going on here. Do you want net zero at all? Do you want to acknowledge net zero by 2050 is possible or not? And then have a look at how you might want to achieve net zero, but you might want to do it in a timeframe that's sustainable for Australian industry, businesses and families to actually make a transition there without destroying every rural and regional community in its wake. And that's, where it's at. It's 2.5 years to an election. The electorate is not honed in on this. And quite honestly, the 5 people who decided to make a big hoopla of it today, I think are causing some of these problems when there could be a discussion in the party room. There could be more of an attempt. And at the end of the day, this government has put a noose around its own neck. And if I was thinking with a political hat on, I'd let the government fail, because they're going to be out there saying, we're going to achieve all of these things that we're only 5 years away from, and they're absolutely nowhere near it. And they're not going to hit them at all. And look, I might be very unpopular for saying this, but the Liberals had a mountain to climb last election and they went backwards. So I think it's 6 years of opposition unless Albanese completely implodes, unfortunately, and therefore this Labor government is going to have to wear when the transition should take place.
That is exactly the point, what you just said. It's 6 years unless Albanese implodes because the coalition is not holding the government.
I don't think this is the issue.
Because the coalition is not holding the government to account.
But if they think net zero is the issue rather than the state of the energy market...
Yeah, the energy policy is the issue. Let's bring in James now. James, you're at the Daily Telegraph Bush Summit. What are you hearing from farmers about this issue?
Well, Sherry, I've seen this firsthand over the last few months during trips to Yass and Crookwell near Goulburn. And while there are some farmers that are obviously benefiting from net zero projects by hosting them on their properties, sometimes to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, the people nearby have obvious concerns about the impact on their land, but also they haven't taken kindly to the fact that just someone's come into town with a map and all of a sudden said, hey, these turbines are going here, here and here, here's your boundary fence, and you're not going to get a cent from all of that. So they've had to become net zero experts overnight. I've got fears about the future of our food bowl, and I think farmers have already survived fire and flood and drought and volatile prices, and all of a sudden this is a brand new challenge. But I also just wonder where we're actually going to be heading when, as Holly points out, every quarter a report comes out that says we're not actually hitting the emission cuts that we've been promised or we have to by 2030. As a result, governments panic, and that's when the concern is that they start to allow more projects through the pipeline and railroad regional communities. So it's a massive concern in the bush, and I don't think farmers are taking kindly to the way they've been treated by net zero executives from interstate or, in most cases, from overseas.
Yeah, and great reporting on this, by the way, James, in the telly today. Look, I just want to get to this story before we go because it is beyond shocking and absurd. This is about the New York Democratic mayoral candidate, Mamdani. He's, as you know, running on a radical platform, but he's now come out and said that he'd end misdemeanor charges. I mean, this is just going to... This is so radical that it'll turn New York basically into San Francisco, Holly.
Well, and this is what's happening in San Francisco. People are just walking into stores and helping themselves because there's no penalty. If I think it's $100 is the value. So if you steal things for less than worth $100, there's no penalty whatsoever. So shopkeepers are having to keep everything locked up because people can just walk in, take what they want and walk out, and there's absolutely no penalty. It's anarchy that's coming to pass. And this guy's nuts. I mean, he is dead set insane. And I know New York has sort of always lent towards the Democrats, but if this isn't a wake-up call for what would happen in New York, it's dreadful.
Well, so many New Yorkers already leaving because of the new tax laws. I think if he gets in, it'll be the final straw. All right, Holly Hughes and James Willis, great to see you both as always.
Thanks, Shari.